Have you ever seen someone standing behind you in the mirror, even when you know you're alone? A flicker of movement in your peripheral vision that vanishes the moment you try to focus on it. A shape that doesn't belong. Most of us dismiss it. A trick of the light, a tired mind. But last fall, a ritual started circulating on fringe forums and late-night message boards. It wasn't a game, not really. It was an invitation. They called it the one behind. The instructions were simple, the rules absolute. And for a group of 4 students at Blackwood University, it was a dare they couldn't resist. Their video is the last piece of evidence of what happened in that dorm room, and it's why no one dares play it again. The air in room 3B of the Northwood dormitory was thick with the smell of stale pizza and cheap energy drinks. It was the kind of Tuesday night that felt like a Wednesday morning, limp, gray, and stretched thin by midterm anxiety. Liam, ever the instigator, had his laptop open, the screen casting a pale, sickly light on his face. "You guys have to see this," he said, his voice a low, conspiratorial hum. Maya was sketching in her notebook, her charcoal pencil scratching a frantic rhythm. Noah was pretending to study, but his eyes kept flicking to the window, to the skeletal branches of the oaks outside. Chloe was the only one who seemed interested, leaning over Liam's shoulder. "What is it?" she asked, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "Another one of your deep web ghost stories." "Better," Liam grinned. "It's a ritual. They're calling it the one behind. People are filming themselves doing it. Some of them, they're freaking out." He scrolled through a forum, post after post detailed experiences. Felt a cold spot, heard a whisper. "I saw something. I swear I saw something." Most were dismissed as hoaxes, but the sheer volume of them created a kind of digital folklore, a modern ghost story told in pixels and panicked comments. The rules were laid out in stark, white text on a black background. 1. Go to a room with a mirror. The larger the better. 2. Wait until after midnight. Turn off all the lights. 3. 4 participants must stand shoulder to shoulder, facing the mirror. 4. One person must record. The camera is your only witness. 5. Together you will ask 7 questions. Speak them clearly into the darkness. "This is stupid," Noah muttered, finally closing his textbook. His voice was steady, but he wouldn't look at the laptop screen. He was the skeptic, the anchor of reason in their group. "It's just mass hysteria. People see what they want to see." "Or what they're told to see," Meyer added without looking up. Her drawing was taking shape, a distorted face, all sharp angles and empty sockets. "But what if it's not?" Liam challenged, his eyes gleaming. "What if for just one night we try something that isn't normal? Aren't you bored? We study, we eat, we sleep. This is something else." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken curiosity. The seed was planted. It was Chloe who watered it. "Okay," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Let's do it. What are the questions?" Liam's grin widened. He scrolled down. The 7 requests glowed on the screen, an eerie poem of trespass. "We know you are there. We ask you to listen. We offer our silence. We ask for a sign. We offer our eyes. We ask you to be seen. We offer our breath. We ask you to be heard. We offer our fear. We ask for your name. We offer our space. We ask you to step forward. We are empty. We ask you to enter." Noah shook his head, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. "This is a bad idea, Liam, a really bad idea." But the vote was already cast, 3-1. Liam set his phone to record, propping it on a stack of books aimed at the large wardrobe mirror. The air in the room grew still, charged with anticipation. The game, the invitation, was about to be accepted. And outside, the wind began to pick up, rattling the window pane like a fingernail scratching on glass. The darkness in room 3B was absolute. It felt physical, a heavy blanket that muffled sound and stole the breath. The only light was the tiny red dot of Liam's phone, a demonic little eye watching them from across the room. They stood as instructed, shoulder to shoulder, four indistinct shapes facing an even blacker rectangle of glass. Liam on the left, then Chloe, Maya, and finally Noah, reluctant and rigid at the end of the line. "Ready?" Liam's voice was a tremor in the void. A chorus of faint yes and a tight-lipped silence from Noah was his answer. The first request felt absurd, like a line from a bad play. "We know you are there, we ask you to listen." They recited it together, their voices uneven, a clumsy choir in the dark. Nothing, just the sound of their own breathing, already starting to feel loud and invasive. The smell of dust and old wood from the wardrobe seemed to hang in the air. "We offer our silence, we ask for a sign." Again, they spoke it into the mirror. The silence that followed was different. It felt expectant. Noah could feel the fine hairs on his arms standing on end. He told himself it was the cold, the power of suggestion, but a primal part of his brain screamed that they were being watched. "We offer our eyes, we ask you to be seen." Chloe let out a small, nervous giggle that died instantly. "I can't see anything," she whispered. "Shut up," Liam hissed. "We have to be serious. We offer our breath, we ask you to be heard." This time after they spoke, something did happen. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside their locked door. A collective jolt went through them. Noah's heart hammered against his ribs. It's an old building, he thought, his rational mind fighting for control. "The dorms are never quiet. We offer our fear, we ask for your name." The words hung in the air, a plea wrapped in terror. The room grew colder. It wasn't a draft. It was a deep, penetrating chill that felt like it was coming from inside the walls, from inside the mirror itself. Maya, who hadn't spoken a word, shivered so hard her shoulder bumped against Chloe's. "Liam, maybe we should stop," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "One more," Liam insisted, his voice strained. "We have to get to the sixth one. That's when it happens in the videos." Noah wanted to scream at them to stop, to turn on the lights and end this stupid, dangerous game, but the fear had paralyzed him. He was a statue made of ice and adrenaline. His eyes were wide open, staring into the blackness of the mirror, trying to find his own reflection and failing. It was just a void. Then together they spoke the sixth request. Their voices were ragged, desperate. "We offer our space, we ask you to step forward." For a full 10 seconds, the universe held its breath. The silence was so profound it hurt their ears. And then it began. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. A subtle pressure change in the room, like the air itself was being displaced by something massive and unseen. And in the mirror, though their eyes couldn't perceive it in the pitch black, Liam's phone camera, with its superior light sensitivity, was capturing the shift. Behind each of their four silhouettes, another shape was starting to resolve. A tall, impossibly thin outline that wasn't there a moment ago. It was faint, a smudge of deeper black against the black, but it was there. A fifth person had joined their line in the reflection, faceless, motionless, waiting. The feeling of being watched was no longer a suspicion, it was a certainty. It was a physical weight pressing down on them, a cold hand on the back of their necks. Noah could feel it most acutely. The space directly behind him felt occupied. He fought the overwhelming urge to turn around. Did you feel that?" Chloe stammered, her voice cracking. "I felt it," Maya whispered. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, which was somehow more terrifying than panic. Liam, however, was high on the thrill. "We're not done," he urged, his voice tight with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "The last question, we have to finish it." "No," Noah said, his voice firm, breaking his silence. "Turn on the light, Liam, now. We're almost there." "I said turn it on." Noah's voice echoed in the small room, sharp and loud, but it was too late. As if spurred by Liam's insistence, they stumbled through the final, terrible request. Their voices were a disjointed mess, a frantic prayer to something they should have left sleeping in the dark. "We are empty, we ask you to enter." The moment the last word left their lips, the reaction was instantaneous and violent. It wasn't a creak or a whisper. It was a deep, guttural thump that came from within the wardrobe, as if a great weight had been dropped inside it. It was a sound so solid, so real, it shattered the fragile membrane of the supernatural and slammed into the real world. Chloe screamed, a raw, piercing shriek of pure terror. That's what broke the spell. Noah lunged for the light switch by the door, his hands fumbling against the wall. For a horrifying second, his fingers found nothing but cold plaster. Then he found the switch and flipped it. The room flooded with harsh, sterile, fluorescent light. They all stood there, blinking, chests heaving, their faces pale and slick with sweat. The room was exactly as it had been. The wardrobe was closed, the air was still, there was nothing there, they were alone. They all turned, almost in unison, to the mirror. Their 4 reflections stared back, stark and ordinary. Behind them, there was nothing but the beige wall of the dorm room. A wave of dizzying relief washed over Noah, so potent it made him feel weak. "See," he breathed, trying to force a laugh that came out as a strangled cough. "Nothing, it was just our minds playing tricks on us." Liam, looking shaken for the first time, nodded slowly. Yeah, just the dark." Chloe was crying silently, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, but Maya wasn't looking at them. She was still staring intently at the mirror. Her face was a mask of concentration. "Maya," Chloe asked, "are you okay?" Maya didn't answer. She took a half step closer to the mirror, her eyes narrowed. She was looking at her own reflection, but also at the space just behind it. "What is it?" Liam asked, his bravado gone, replaced by a creeping dread. "His reflection," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. She pointed a trembling finger at the mirror, at Noah's reflection. "It's wrong." They all looked. At first it seemed normal. There was Noah, pale and shaken, but then they saw it. As Noah turned his head slightly to look at Maya, his reflection remained perfectly still, its eyes locked forward, staring directly out of the mirror. For a split second, the reflected Noah held his gaze, unblinking, before its movements synced back up with the real Noah. It was a tiny glitch, a momentary lag, but in the sterile light of the dorm room, it was more terrifying than anything that had happened in the dark. The game was over. The lights were on, but something had followed them out. The days that followed were thick with a forced normalcy. They didn't talk about that night. It became a taboo subject, a shared trauma locked away in a box. They went to class, they studied in the library, they ate in the crowded dining hall, performing the motions of their lives. But the silence was loud. It sat between them at their table, a fifth, unseen guest. Noah became the epicenter of the quiet dread. He tried to rationalize what Maya had seen, a trick of the light, a weird angle, the reflection of the fluorescent bulb flickering. He repeated these explanations to himself like a mantra, but the conviction wasn't there. The lag, as he started calling it in his head, began to happen more frequently. It would be small things. He'd be brushing his teeth, and as he spat into the sink and looked up, his reflection would still be leaning over, its head down, for a fraction of a second before snapping upright. He'd walk past a shop window, and his reflection's stride would be just slightly out of sync with his own. A momentary, disorienting stutter in reality. He started avoiding mirrors. He'd shower in the dark, dress facing the wall, shave using only his sense of touch. But the modern world is a hall of mirrors. The screen of his phone, the dark glass of a television, the polished chrome of a doorknob. Everywhere he looked, he saw a version of himself that was no longer his own. One afternoon, he was in the campus coffee shop with Chloe, trying to pretend everything was fine. "You seem tired," she said, stirring her latte. Her eyes were shadowed with concern. "You haven't been sleeping, have you? Just stressed." "Midterms," he lied. He glanced at the polished steel of the espresso machine behind the counter. He saw his reflection, sitting opposite Chloe. But the reflection wasn't looking at her. It was looking directly at him, a dead, flat stare. And as he watched, horrified, the reflection slowly, deliberately, raised a hand and pressed a single finger to its lips. A gesture for silence. Noah's breath hitched. He jerked his head away, his heart pounding. "Noah, what's wrong?" Chloe asked, her voice sharp with worry. "Nothing," he gasped, pushing his chair back. I have to go." He fled the coffee shop, leaving her sitting there, confused and hurt. He didn't stop running until he was back in his dorm, the door locked behind him. He leaned against it, chest heaving. The paranoia was becoming a physical thing, a constant pressure in his skull. He was losing his mind, that had to be it. He was cracking under the pressure of a prank that had gone too far. That night, he had the first dream. He was standing in his dorm room, but it was wrong. The dimensions were skewed, the corners too sharp. The only light came from the wardrobe mirror, which glowed with a faint, phosphorescent light, and standing in front of it was the figure. Tall, thin, its features obscured by shadow, as if it were made of smoke. It was utterly still. In the dream, Noah felt a strange calm. He knew he was supposed to be afraid, but he wasn't. He just watched. The figure slowly turned its head, and though it had no face, no eyes, he could feel its gaze on him. It lifted a long, slender arm and pointed, not at him, but at the foot of his bed. Noah woke up with a gasp, drenched in sweat. The dream was already fading, but the image of that pointing finger was burned into his mind. He lay there for a long time, listening to the hum of the mini fridge, the creaks of the old building. The room was empty. He was alone. Then his blood ran cold. He always slept with his shoes neatly placed by the door. But now, standing at the foot of his bed, exactly where the figure in his dream had pointed, was a single, solitary footprint. It was wet, as if someone had stepped out of a puddle, and it was pointed directly at him. It was a footprint in the shape of a bare foot, but it was too long, the toes too thin. It was already beginning to evaporate into the carpet. Liam was the first to disappear. There was no drama, no struggle. One morning, he just wasn't there. His bed was made, his laptop was gone, and his roommate assumed he'd gone home for a long weekend. But when his parents called on Sunday, frantic, a missing person report was filed. Campus police asked a few questions, but Liam was an adult. He could leave if he wanted to. The consensus was that he'd just taken off, but Chloe, Maya, and Noah knew better. They met in a hushed, terrified huddle in the library, the one place that felt safe and brightly lit. He wouldn't just leave, Chloe insisted, her voice trembling. Not without his phone. They said his phone was still on his charger. "The police think he ran off with some girl," Maya said, her voice hollow. She was tracing the patterns on the table with her finger over and over. "They're not taking it seriously." Noah said nothing. He hadn't slept in 2 days. The image of the wet footprint was seared onto his retinas. He felt a cold, creeping certainty that Liam's disappearance was just the beginning. The thing they had invited in was a collector, and it had just claimed its first piece. He showed them the video from that night. He had copied it from Liam's phone before it was taken as evidence. They watched it on his laptop, huddled close, the sound turned down low. There it was. As they spoke the sixth request, the shapes began to form, 4 of them, one behind each of them. Faceless silhouettes in the digital noise. Noah felt sick. It wasn't a trick of the light, it was real. They had photographic proof of their own haunting. "We have to show this to someone," Chloe whispered, horrified. "And say what?" Noah's voice was bitter. "That we played a stupid internet game and summoned a ghost. They'll think we're crazy. They'll think we had something to do with Liam." He was right. They were isolated, trapped with a secret that was not only unbelievable but was actively hunting them. The world kept turning, students laughed on the quad, professors gave lectures, but the 3 of them were living in a different reality, one where the shadows had teeth. That night, Noah had the second dream. He was back in the warped version of his room. The glowing mirror was there, and so was the figure. But it was no longer standing by the wardrobe. It was now standing in the center of the room, halfway between the mirror and his bed. It was closer. The sense of calm was gone. This time he was paralyzed by a thick, suffocating dread. He couldn't move, he couldn't scream, he could only watch as the faceless thing lifted its hand again. It didn't point, it beckoned. A slow, deliberate curl of its long, thin fingers. "Come here." Noah awoke with a violent jolt, his own scream caught in his throat. His heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of his chest. He scrambled to turn on his bedside lamp, his hand shaking so badly he almost knocked it over. The light flooded the room. It was empty, safe. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to calm his frantic breathing. It was just a dream, a nightmare. But when he opened his eyes, he saw it. Standing in the middle of his room, precisely where the figure had been in his dream, was a small pool of dark, brackish water. The carpet was soaked through in a perfect circle, as if someone had stood there, dripping, for a very long time. And from that puddle, a single line of wet, elongated footprints led from the center of the room, not to the door, but directly to the side of his bed. They stopped right where he was lying. The discovery of Maya's body sent a shockwave of genuine horror through the campus. The casual speculation that had surrounded Liam's disappearance curdled into active fear. She was found by her roommate, who had come back from a weekend away. The details spread through the dorms in hushed, morbid whispers. Maya was in her room. She was facing the full-length mirror on her closet door. Her eyes, the whispers, would falter here. The official story from the university was a tragic, unexplained death. The unofficial one, the one that traveled through text messages and late-night calls, was far more specific. Her eyes had been gouged out, and on the surface of the mirror, written in what looked like blood, were two words: eyes offered. The police swarmed the dorm. Chloe and Noah were questioned for hours. They sat in a sterile interrogation room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the questions clinical and sharp. Where were you? Did Maya seem depressed? Was she involved with anyone? Did she do drugs? They told the truth, but a version of it scrubbed clean of the supernatural. They said Maya had been withdrawn and anxious since Liam disappeared. They said she had become obsessed with mirrors. They didn't mention the game. They didn't mention the video. To do so would be to confess to a crime of madness. When they were finally released, Chloe was a wreck, sobbing uncontrollably. Noah felt hollowed out. The grief was there, but it was buried under a glacier of pure, crystalline terror. He knew what had happened. It wasn't a murder, not in the way the police understood it. It was a collection. The entity was taking back the things they had offered. We offer our eyes. We ask you to be seen. Maya had seen it. She had been the first to notice the lag in the reflection. She had stared too long, and it had come to claim its due. Liam, the instigator, the one who invited it in and offered up their shared space, was simply taken. We offer our space. We ask you to step forward. He had been the first offering. There were only two of them left, two offerings unclaimed. Noah found Chloe later that evening, sitting on a bench by the campus lake, hugging her knees to her chest. She was staring out at the black water, her face pale in the moonlight. "It's coming for us, isn't it?" she said, not looking at him. Her voice was brittle. "It took Liam, it took Maya." "I don't know," Noah lied. "Don't," she snapped, turning to him, her eyes flashing with anger and fear. "Don't lie to me, Noah, not now, you know it is. I see how you look over your shoulder, you avoid windows, you won't even look at your own phone screen." She started to break down, her words punctuated by ragged sobs. "I can't sleep. I keep hearing things, whispers. I think it's trying to say my name. We offer our breath, we ask you to be heard. We offer our fear, we ask for your name." Noah felt a cold dread wash over him. The offerings, it was following the list. Chloe was next. It wanted her fear. It wanted to be heard. He grabbed her by the shoulders. "Chloe, listen to me. We can't stay here. We have to leave. We have to go somewhere it can't find us. Somewhere without mirrors." She just shook her head, a fatalistic calm settling over her. Where, Noah? Where can we go? It's not in the room anymore. It's with us. It's behind us. Always. She looked over his shoulder, her eyes wide with a terror that had nothing to do with him. I see him sometimes, she whispered. Just for a second, in a car window, in a puddle. He's always there, watching, waiting for me to be afraid enough. She pulled away from him and started walking back towards the dorms, a solitary figure moving through the darkness. Noah didn't follow. He just stood there, realizing the futility of it all. You can't run from your own reflection. You can't run from the thing that wears your face. Chloe descended into madness with terrifying speed. The whispers she heard grew louder, more insistent. She stopped going to class. She wouldn't leave her room where she had covered every reflective surface, her mirror, her window, her laptop screen, with thick black tape. Noah would bring her food, leaving it outside her door because she refused to open it. Sometimes he could hear her inside, talking to herself, or not to herself. He would press his ear to the door and hear fragments of a one-sided conversation. "No, please, I don't know," she would cry. "Leave me alone." Then there would be long periods of silence, followed by a sudden, frantic shuffling, as if she were scrambling away from something in the room with her. He knew what was happening. It was claiming her fear, tormenting her, feeding on the very thing she had offered it. The university administration, alerted by her professors, intervened. They called it a psychological breakdown brought on by the trauma of her friend's death and disappearance. They sent counselors. They tried to get her to open the door. She wouldn't. She only screamed at them to go away, that they would let him in. Noah felt a crushing weight of guilt. This was his fault too. He had stood with them. He had spoken the words. His skepticism had been a flimsy shield that had shattered at the first touch of real darkness. That night he had the third and final dream. It began the same, the warped room, the phosphorescent glow from the wardrobe mirror, but the figure was no longer in the center of the room. It was standing directly beside his bed. It was so close he could have reached out and touched it. The blackness of it was absolute, a hole in reality. It didn't radiate cold anymore. It radiated nothing. It was a void. And for the first time he could make out a detail. Where its face should have been, there was only a smooth, unbroken surface like polished obsidian. It was a mirror that reflected nothing. He was pinned to the bed, unable to move, his lungs burning for air he couldn't draw. The figure didn't point. It didn't beckon. Slowly, deliberately, it raised its long, slender arm and reached for him. He could see the impossibly long fingers, like the legs of a spider, unfurling. They drifted down, closer and closer to his shoulder. He knew, with a certainty that transcended dream logic, that if those fingers touched him, it would be over, the final offering. "We are empty, we ask you to enter." It would step inside him. He would become the new reflection. The lag would be gone because he would be the one left behind in the glass, and it would be the one walking around in his skin. He fought against the paralysis with every ounce of his will. His muscles screamed in protest. A guttural, animal sound tore from his throat as he thrashed, rolling off the side of the bed and hitting the floor with a sickening thud. The impact woke him up. He was on the floor of his dorm room, gasping for breath, his body drenched in cold sweat. The room was dark and silent, but the feeling was still there. The sense of an immense, patient presence right beside him. His shoulder tingled, an icy, burning sensation, as if it had been grazed by something colder than death. He didn't dare look. He just scrambled to his feet and fled. He didn't grab his wallet, his keys, or his phone. He just ran out of the room, down the empty hallway, and burst out into the pre-dawn chill, the warning from his dream echoing in his mind. Don't let it touch you. He was the last one left, and it was his turn. Noah ran. He didn't know where he was going. He just put the campus behind him, the brick buildings and manicured lawns shrinking in the gray morning light. He ended up at a bus station, a grimy place that smelled of disinfectant and despair. He felt like a ghost, invisible to the tired-looking people waiting for their own escapes. He had no money, no phone. He was utterly adrift. The terror of the last few weeks had burned away everything else, leaving only the raw instinct for survival. He needed to warn Chloe. He needed to tell someone, but who would listen? He found a piece of discarded paper and a pen on a table. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely form the letters. He didn't know who he was writing it for, maybe for the person who would find his body. Maybe for the next group of stupid kids who thought it would be fun to play a game with the dark. He wrote down the only piece of advice that mattered now, the one lesson he had learned in his dream as those fingers reached for him. Don't turn around when he touches your shoulder, just run. He left the note on the bench, a final, desperate message in a bottle. He never saw Chloe again. The day after he fled, campus security finally forced her door open. The room was empty. The window was wide open. The black tape had been torn off her mirror. According to the official report, she had vanished, just like Liam. Another troubled student who couldn't handle the pressure. Case closed, but the students knew. The story of Room 3B of the four friends became a new kind of campus legend. It wasn't about a ghost in the theater or a curse on the bell tower. It was something more intimate, more modern, a virus of fear that spread through whispers. They said if you looked in a mirror late at night in the Northwood dormitory, you might see them. Liam, Maya, Chloe, and Noah, four shapes standing shoulder to shoulder. And if you look closely at the one on the end, the one whose movements sometimes lag just a little, you might see him turn his head. You might see his eyes, trapped behind the glass, pleading with you. From then on, the word spread beyond the campus, back to the forums where it all began. A new rule was added to the game of the one behind, a postscript born from tragedy. If you see a reflection in the mirror that doesn't match your movements, don't look too long. He's not a ghost, he's an occupant, and he's testing the glass, looking for cracks. He's waiting to see if you're ready to replace the old one.